Thank you, Speaker. When the GST was introduced by the Howard government, Prime Minister Howard was adamant that it would never ever increase beyond 10%. A senior caller on ABC radio in Perth in 2001 asked the Prime Minister Howard, "If you were re-elected, will you increase the GST? You spoke on a program last year to say that, as a senior, I would be so much better off with the GST. Well, I know my sums don't add up." Prime Minister Howard responded to the caller, "Well, the answer to the first question is no. We will not increase the GST." When pressed further by the radio announcer about whether the GST would be increased, Prime Minister Howard said, "But we're not going to increase the GST." The radio announcer replied, "Never ever? John Howard, we are not going to increase the GST. There are no circumstances in which the GST, in fact, needs to be increased." We fast forward from that interview to 2015, and we have a senior National Party senator from Queensland, senior Liberal National Party senator Ian McDonald, saying, and I quote, "I was around when this GST proposal was originally introduced, and at the time I and everyone around from the Prime Minister down promised that it would never go beyond 10%. We all swore in blood that it would not, that it would remain at 10%, and that's a commitment that I, as one of them who gave it, intend to honour." End quote. Senator McDonald from Queensland is not the only one in the current government who was in the coalition government that made that 2000 promise. So I wonder whether the others will honour their commitments that sworn in blood, including those members of the executive, such as the Deputy Prime Minister Warren Truss, the Defence Minister Payne, the Foreign Affairs Minister Bishop, the current Special Minister of State Brough, and those other members of the coalition government, Tony Abbott, Bronwyn Bishop, Bruce Scott, Ian Macfarlane, Warren Inch, Bill Heffernan, Sharman Stone, Kevin Andrews, Senators Ronaldson and Abetz, all made that commitment that the GST would never ever go above 10%. What we do know now is that the Turnbull government is considering breaking that sacred commitment to the Australian people and is considering raising the GST or broadening the GST. Prime Minister Turnbull indicated so on 3AW on the 6th of October 2015. He said, Neil Mitchell, but everything is on the table. Superannuation, negative gearing, capital gains, tax, everything. The GST, everything is on the table. Question from Neil Mitchell. Prime Minister Turnbull responded, "Everything is on the table." That's right. And again to the ABC on Radio National on the 1st of October this year, Prime Minister Turnbull, "Fran, everything is on the table." We know on this side of the House what the consequences of raising or broadening the GST will be. It will increase the price of everything. Every single one of my constituents will have to pay more. Every single one of my constituents who is struggling to make ends meet will have to pay more. It will cost my constituents more each time they go to get the groceries, every time they buy their children's school books, every time they go to the doctor, every time they pay for their electricity and gas bills, even if they go to the Rockley markets and stock up on fresh fruit and vegetable. NatSem modelling shows that if the GST is increased to 15%, so a 50% increase, and broadened to apply to fresh food, healthcare, education, water and sewerage, an average family with a household income of $86,000 will pay an extra $6,200 per year. If the GST is increased to 15% and the base left as it is now, that family would still pay $3,200 extra each year. If the base is broadened to include fresh food, heavens help us if that ever happens, but healthcare, education, water and sewerage, the rate is left, but still left at the 10%, a family would still pay an extra $3,000 per year. Costs at a time when families are doing it tough. The GST does not currently apply to fresh food, as we see if you go to your grocery store, to medicine and healthcare, to school, TAFE and university fees, childcare and earlier childhood education, and rent, mortgage payments and council rates. There is a good reason for that. These are all things that we do not have a choice to pay for. They are what we call the essentials. Even if the government tries to compensate taxpayers by lowering the rate of income tax, that will not adequately compensate the people who will be worse off. And we all know how these sugar hits to bring in the hard vinegar actually turn out. You get a little bit of the flavour out of your mouth for a while, but then soon after the pain comes and stays. The NatSem modelling shows that lowering the rate of income tax by 5% would still make the lowest 60% of households worse off, and the top 40% would be gaining at their expense effectively. It's unfair, it's un-Australian. I cannot believe that the Turnbull government would would do this rather than forcing big multinationals to pay their fair share of tax. Labor will never support an increase to the GST rate or a broadening of the base to include fresh food, healthcare or education.